Well, welcome to our final session here at Neighborhood Economics, Healing Our Communities. So glad to have you all here with us and through to the bitter end. But as I will attest, and you'll hear in a minute, that since we started Neighborhood Economics, we've been challenged by a dear friend of Neighborhood Economics to not let these events be the end, but let them be the beginning. I want to say, first of all, that we do have a platform called Mighty Networks that we're using with Faith and Finance, where a group of folks is emerging to be more connected all the time, 24/7, as we keep moving forward instead of just at events. And many of you are already members of it. And if you're not a member of it, we hope that you'll join that network so we can continue these conversations. There have been so many great conversations started over these last 2 days, and we're really excited to see what's next. I know that is probably the direction that our dear friend Peter Block is going to take us when he comes and joins me here on screen. And we recall, Peter, when after the Louisville event, the first phone call that we had with you, and you said, well, I'm thinking maybe we want you to come to Cincinnati, but we don't want you to come just to have an event. We want you to come if you can show us that Cincinnati will be better or be different, be growing, will be a different place because neighborhood economics happen. So I really want to invite you to help challenge all of us who have been here for these 2 days to think about how we will be different and how our world will be different because we've been in these conversations. Welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I didn't come to challenge anybody. I've been listening to what people have been saying, and it's stunning, the conversations you've been having. The knowledge, the depth, the commitment, the on-the-ground life. I know Sidell, I've heard her say we're at the intersection of race and greed, and that's a beautiful way to say it. And so I'm just happy to be included here. You know, what changes the world is changing the narrative. That's what you're doing. There's all kinds of programs in the world. There's all kinds of conferences in the world, but what you created here is a shift in narrative is what we're looking for. And I love the fact that finance and faith have met each other, because in the faith world, it's hard to talk about money. In the money world, the development world, you don't want to talk about faith unless it's faith in John Locke. And as Dr. Jennings said, the belief that God ordained every acre of land to be productive, otherwise it's wasted. And what he and we are questioning. And to me, we're trying to create a narrative that's an alternative to the current plantation mentality. And I think all the content in the world you have in this conference. The challenge for all of us is who can we invite into this conversation? Because you've got here enormously committed people that are watching, not just the ones that are speaking. And so that means that we have to bring people together. And the faith community is great at that. What I love about the faith community is it has the right language. It doesn't have to invent a new language. It has to get decided, what you're doing here, to get interested in money and get interested in land and get interested in debt and housing. And I think that's the real change. And so you might say, well, who do I want to invite into the next conversation in the place where I live? You know, the COVID has kind of made things visible that were true. Like the notion of, you calling me, Rosalie?
Not me.
Okay, sorry, somebody can name this. I'm not sure. Social distancing began after the Second World War. It was called the suburbs. It was called the interstate highway. The interstate highways stuck a knife into most neighborhoods. And the social distancing put the front porch in the backyard and let me get in my house without opening my garage door. I have to click in. And so what we're trying to do something about that. I think also the essence of neighborhood economics is more relevant than ever. One way to continue this is to change the way we measure things. The dominant narrative, the quote, empire narrative, is to measure things according to GDP, GNP. The traditional economist is a scarcity belief system. What Dr. Jennings and Siddell and Diamond and others are arguing for is a abundant notion that we have enough. What's implicated, the change in structure is to stop outsourcing what we can create for ourselves. Right now, we think we can get a school to raise our children. We think the police are going to keep us safe. And so we change the nature of our questions. We don't ask people, is this a safe neighborhood? Because if I ask you that, then I've declared you as a dangerous person. I don't ask you how many years of schooling have you had. Because if I ask you that, I've said you're stupid. I don't ask you what your average annual income is, because that's not the measure of a person. And so we're kind of trying to change. That's a narrative change. So we have a measurement device that says, what are you good at? What do you love to do? What are you willing to teach other people? These are the measures of a neighborhood. And according to these measures, what we used to call low-income neighborhoods do fine. They have enormous capacity, enormous skills. It's just that the plantation mentality says, let's call these neighborhoods broken. If I call you poor, I've declared you broken. I don't use the word poor except when I make sentences like this. And so it's really a shift in how we think about each other. And that's what you all are saying. That's what the church can do. It can be an enormous convening agent. And its goal is not to bring people to Christ or to Abraham. The goal is to use its local presence as a gathering place. And now what you're saying is, let's make it an economic gathering place. And let's find out what people are good at. Let's look at the land. Right now, we devalue the land in low-income neighborhoods for one reason. So the real estate cartel can make future profits from this land. Police are sent in to the West End in Cincinnati to give out citations, even people sitting on their own front porch, so they can spread the story that this is a broken neighborhood and we need to scrape and start again. And so displacement to me is what you're really talking about, an alternative to. And I think, all that's powerful stuff. We change the story that like there's no such thing as a homeless person. I don't show up and say I'm Peter and I'm housed. And so you're really talking about citizens. You're talking about children of God. You're talking about retelling the story of America. Dr. Jennings said, when the pilgrims and the settlers came over, the idea that Columbus discovered America, really. And so most of that's about commerce. Most of that was about owning the land. And so there's all kinds of efforts now to create common land ownership, to take land off the speculative market. So land is valuable, even if it's not built on. And so it's a really rewriting of a whole economic story is what you're doing. And you have the tools to do that. And now we need to invite people into the conversation about what's the alternative. Because the tendency is to study things. Cincinnati's done 12 studies on racism in the last 16 years. And every study showed the same thing. It's a racist community. And so to me, doing a study is a defense against transformation. It's a defense against a new narrative. It's a defense against faith becoming friends with finance. And the faith community has assets. Endowments are fascinating. And most churches that have large endowments select trustees whose job is to make sure the endowment doesn't shrink. And so what you're talking about is sunset funding, sunset foundations, sunset endowments where we want to spend the money in hard times instead of going with the minimum 5%. And to me, these are the elements of a different structure that Dr. Jennings and Siddell and Diamond and others are talking about. That let the land be, stop measuring according to average income and GNP and GDP. Those are just made up for globalization. We want common ownership of the land to create equity. The racial tension is that we don't own enough, blacks don't own enough land. You're talking about creating a black economy and get off the notion that people need more schooling. They need more police protection. The neighborhood and family raise a child. School can't raise a child, especially black kids. They don't do well in school. 16 so-called failing schools in Cincinnati are all predicted by the economic level of their parents. It's not a problem in leadership, a problem in teaching. And so I think you're going after the heart of what's going to make a difference in the racial and equity. When you talk about racial equity, if you don't have the word equity in there, then you're just stuck with consciousness, which of course you want to change. And so I heard her say that, 75% of Americans don't have a black as a friend. And I think proximity, all these things make total sense. And I think what you're doing is phenomenal. It also has to do with health. People who have good social capital, which just means they trust each other, and they work together to make this place better. They're healthier. Their kids do better in school. So that's what you're building. And social services won't do that. Cincinnati spends $1 billion a year in social services. And they're all well-meaning people, but it doesn't change the economic and living conditions of the people they're trying to serve. It just allows them to endure the conditions under which they're living. And so I think you're creating another path outside of the social service world. I think there's policy implications, but we can't wait for mayors and city councils to do anything. So I'm happy to be part of this, happy. And what continues this, and it's slow work, I don't trust speed, I don't trust scale. Those are the value proposition of empire and the commercial exploitation is that we have to do it fast, we have to do it widespread. I don't trust convenience. You're on an inconvenient path. To me, faith calls for inconvenience. It doesn't call for speed, it doesn't call for scale. It calls for depth, intimacy, connection, and a feeling that nothing I do is bound by my property line. And so it's a convening function, it's a convening agency. And these things make sense to me. But also, the idea of development is exploitative in itself. 1949, Harry Truman declared since the United States came out well after the war, we were going to help the undeveloped countries of the world. We call them third world countries. A friend of mine, Gustavo Esteves, says, well, when he said that, I didn't know he's a Mexican. He lives in Mexico. He said, I didn't know Mexico was an undeveloped country. I didn't know I was undeveloped. I thought I was Mexican. And so all these constructs of progress, development, speed, scale, convenience, leveraging the land. We can put 7 stories on that land. Why only put 3? All of those are the tools of the plantation, or the mindset of the plantation and the land in low-income and black neighborhoods. It's just a modern form of plantation. And that's what all of you are coming together to agree on and to find means to do that and the tools to do that. And I last thought is there's a leadership level in our cities that doesn't run institutions. And all the efforts we've had is to get the top people on board. We've had a childhood poverty program with $5 million from leaders and corporations. None of that makes a difference. And so you're looking for leadership as a quality, as the nature of the people that you bring together. And then I don't believe that the institutions committed as they are to social justice, are really the place where change is going to happen. It's going to come from people like you inviting local people in neighborhoods to come together, asking them, what are you good at? What do you want to do? How do you want to change this place? And then later on, you can bring the social services in. You can bring the, and creating neighborhood-friendly banks and credit unions. All of that is part of the infrastructure. But in the end, it's you inviting people together and getting them to connect and trust each other and realize that they have gifts and capacities. This is what Dieman calls himself, a social banker. This is what he's such a genius at. And I'm sure all of you are doing the same thing. I just don't know you as well. So those are just some thoughts, and come back in, Rosalie.
I'm here. Corey is a mind reader. He brought me right back in right then.
Thank you. Where are our friends?
They are going to be coming right in too. Let's get Dieman and Sadell back in here. It is fascinating to me how much I learn at each one of these events, starting with Dr. Jennings when Sadell was on that panel, and the total breaking apart of who owns the land and why, and how intentional these decisions have been, how they've been made on our behalf, even though they're not on our behalf. And hearing Carlton Turner, who was on that first session, in a session he was on in the arts, about how Mississippi, my home state, was formed, and the things that he understands about how white men created this political entity called Mississippi that has nothing to do with the hearts of what we're talking about right now. And so I'm so glad to have you come in here and to take that to the next step, saying we've got to let those artificial boundaries go and get into relationship with each other in a way that we can create what works for all of us and for the planet. So
I just want to affirm what you're saying, and what I've learned from Dieman and will learn from Sadell is that we have class distinctions. We're willing to talk about race, actually. We're not willing to talk about class. And that's what finance and religion mean. Finance and faith, it's about class.
Yeah.
And I just think what we have is by design. This is not accidental. Oh, I'm sorry. If I had met you, I would have felt it. No, it's not. It's by design. And what Sadell, I would imagine, I know Dieman does, is redesigning, reconstructing what is a neighborhood and what's the local economy. And he does it through dinners. I don't know how you maintain your thinness, because you're always convening people to eat, Dieman. And I don't know. So I've said enough. Dieman, it's great to see you. And Sadell, it's a nice new beginning for us, because I want to come to a warehouse church. I love the word warehouse. Okay. We're going to make this place beautiful.
Sadell, can you tell us some about how you see the work you're doing, bringing us together?
Well, I think that we're in a little bit of a challenge because of COVID, as we all know, because we're here. We were supposed to be in person in San Antonio, and now we are here online. One of the things that we can do is bring community conversations to this kind of platform, which is something that we do from the Warehouse Church and have been doing since the pandemic began, wanting to offer people care through this particular platform, mental health, small businesses who were struggling with not receiving funds from the government, all kinds of different topical, we had epidemiologists talk to our neighborhood. We had a lot of different kinds of people. And we were actually, and this is supposed to be doing those conversations inside the building of the warehouse downtown and over the Rhine. But because of COVID, we had to make that shift. One of the things that we desire to do is bring those local conversations and that community togetherness to our building when we open prayerfully in April. And that's where our official opening is. We want to make the bottom level of our sanctuary kind of like the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville, a place where artists can come and debut their work, their music, their spoken word, all that kind of thing, in a space where there's food. Mortar grads can come in and to serve them and cater food for them. And we can come together and have conversations, come together and do artistic things. Small concerts can be held inside that sanctuary. And then we're looking to renovate the building next door to have a social enterprise operating through that and to have spaces for young people. Which is very important to us. In particular, we want to utilize the arts and athletics in particular because we have so many people within our congregation who are expert in those areas that help to bring people in our community together, and particularly young people, because in my view, the trajectory of where things are going is kind of like hockey. You want to hit the puck to where it's going, not to where it is, so that you can score and win. And that means that the transformation of the mindset has to happen with our children and has to happen with our young people if we're going to see a future that's different than the present.
We don't have to wait till April. Because once you start realizing it's going to be virtual or nothing, you can make virtual very intimate.
Yeah.
You can break people into groups of 3 and 4 and give them questions that will change their lives.
Yeah, we're already doing that. We're already doing. We actually meet every day. We meet like the Acts Church.
Right.
So breaking the bread, prayer, discipleship, all that happens every single day for our community. The community actually has become closer because of COVID, because we utilize the platforms, and we'll be extending the platforms virtually to invite more and more people into a relationship with the people of the warehouse. So we're already, yes, here, we agree.
Just, because Demon, say something. Are you unmuted?
I'm unmuted.
Good.
Can y'all hear me all right?
To have you muted, I would know. Right? There could be no reason on.
I think.
What are you learning from this conference?
Well, I'm learning about how to keep asking questions, right? And those questions are always going to be had instead of just giving answers. So you talked about the colonial way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
It has scarred people like myself, Sadell, and our families and people we live with.
Yes.
But what's liberating is when those structures are kind of broken down and burned and grieved, that the type of friendships that flourish. And you was just thinking, Sadell, when I got on, we hadn't talked to each other in a while, and she was like, he gonna cuss me out. and that right there, and I was thinking the same thing. And
But you gonna cuss me out?
that you was gonna cuss me out.
What are we cussing each other out for?
Because we hadn't seen each other.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. And so
that's a good reason to be angry. Anything else is just fiction.
It is. And it was the point of this. Right. When friendship matters. And I think learning what I've been listening to throughout the conference is that the cornerstone of civic life is to be a good neighbor.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think there's two questions to me that Jesus asked that were relational questions. And the first one was, who is my neighbor? And the second one was, who are my brother and mother? And I think that the answer to those two questions from a faith-based, Christ-following community are the keys to what internally has to happen and dispositionally has to happen in order for us as a church to be the beacon and the light. I have to consider my conservative brother, my progressive sister, my whatever. I have to consider all of the people who follow Christ, my siblings, even if I don't agree with all of their platforms. And I have to believe that God can move upon their hearts to consider me, not just a Black woman or not just a person from a disenfranchised community, but actually that you are a part of me and I am a part of you. That is the teaching of Jesus. And then if you can't get there and you go to the Good Samaritan and the question comes, who is my neighbor? Then even in that way, my enemy is still my neighbor. And I still am called on to care for, to love, to use my privilege and my resources to make sure that they're all right. And so the way of the gospel covers it 100% around. Even if we are at odds with each other, love demands that we care for and that we help even the people that we are struggling with.
You know, I think that a fast path there is to do something together, not to have a workshop or a service or a special event to bring us together. I don't think that everything you say is true. And you're right, your arm, your hand, your wrist, we're all one body. Christ or not, from my perspective. With Abraham, somebody I'm supposed to know something about and follow. But I think doing something together is what brings us together. And can be anything. It doesn't have to be profound. Clean up a corner, you know, do something together.
Actually, Peter, I got a good story about doing something whimsical, and it involves you. So today,
where's your mute?
So today I had we did a session. Tim Sorens invited me into a session today, and I had really not wanted to do the session. I wanted to do the session with Tim, but I thought there was much more other people. So I invited the deputy mayor of Indianapolis, and I got my friend Andy Beck and Wild Style, which ties into Peter in a second. And it made me think, I was joking and thinking about Peter would just laugh. So we do these things called learning journeys, where we take friends and people from all walks of life on learning journeys together to see things that make you imagine differently. And so there's some work. The reason we had the thing today was really talking about a $50 million shift in money and power that has been given to grassroots people to facilitate, to make sure money got to the hands of people. But this car ride, which includes Wild Style, a good friend of mine's now, I've been knowing for like 10 years, head of a foundation here in Indianapolis, said he wanted to do a learning journey, and I get to pick. So I call Peter up I just come over and like we be just shooting stuff, and I'll bring somebody over. So I bring Brian over, and the conversation on the car ride was so much different from the conversation going back. So part of it was people, you know, of a different culture, different social class, really trying to do the good thing, get to know each other. And he was asking all the wrong questions going back, going there. So we get to Peter, and Peter, we ain't prepped. I just said, this dude coming over, you want to come hang out? And he agreed. He always agreed. And he asked Peter he said, Peter, should DMI make six figures? And Peter said, that's the wrong question. You remember that, Peter?
Say it again. DMI. What did he ask?
That's the wrong question. That you said, should DMI make six figures?
Oh my God.
You remember that?
I do remember that.
What did you tell him?
I forget what I told him.
That's the wrong question.
Yeah.
Diamond is rich. And he left there and you talked about Wild Style and his love for like hip hop. On the car ride, the thing has changed. It also has changed policy since then in the city of Indianapolis, and who gets to govern that. When's just sweeping in the corner, hanging out. What practices are we going to reinstill and cultivate so that these things can happen?
See, one of your criteria was, if you're going to bring money into my neighborhood, put it in our hands. We don't need a program. We don't need expertise. We don't need more services. You said this, somebody said, we're not underserved. Underserved is a statement of contempt. It treats you as if you're needy. You're not needy. You're powerful. I'm glad I said that's the wrong question. I'm going to write that down and make some money off of it.
But the other part was that, Peter, is that us actually believing and actually getting off the couch to go find what's there. So we have to shift too. And I'm not just talking about neighbors, but I'm talking about the grassroots agencies that when we did that neighborhood vitality index.
Yeah.
Man, I found in a 4-block radius, there were like 100 philanthropists, people who said that they give money to their cousins and friends and they don't expect it back.
Yeah, there's everything in your neighborhood. And
so anyway,
that we're looking for.
I have a question, Peter.
Thank you, Dina.
My question has to do with the history that's involved, the holding of the power and the privilege that is currently not in the hands of our neighbors and us. And in a certain way, from our perspective, for me, I will say, even as a nonprofit leader, the statement of you're a philanthropist, you're holding money, you're a bank, you're an organization, you're a powerful corporation. And because of the distribution of power and wealth, I have to write a grant, I have to ask for, and you are scraping off a percent of interest because you feel that you want to help a particular cause that I am purporting, and you are only going to release, when you're talking about plantation mentality, you're only going to release, and so that it's plantation sharecropper-ish deal, as much of or relinquish as much power or privilege or wealth as you want to relinquish. And you are telling us that, you value the contribution, you value all those kinds of things, but we're in that up-down economic situation, whether you're talking about the church and its endowments or whether you're talking about the public sector. And, if we look at the Atlantic and articles that it will take 238 years for an African-American family to equal the wealth of a Caucasian family, all those kinds of statistics, how do we, outside of faith and outside of a belief that the earth is the Lord's and that we have a stewardship responsibility to promulgate his teaching, how do we deal with that reality?
Well, everything you say is true. This is the colonial box that Dr. Jennings talks about. It's demeaning. And the whole philanthropy world and charity world doesn't help. It just doesn't help. And there are fringe groups in philanthropy that when Diamond says, we will take the money, but it's going in the hands of our people. It's not going in the hands of service providers. And we don't want your money if it's based on needs and deficiencies. That's not who we are. There are individuals of privilege and wealth waiting to have a conversation with the two of you. There are people I know, even corporations, that say we're tired of buying tables at fundraisers. We can't see the leverage we're getting. There is goodwill among the colonists, people of privilege. I'm one of them. Okay. But I think we have to treat them as individuals and stop looking for philanthropy, stop looking for charity, looking for people. And that's what Demon's done. He's brought Brian into his neighbors. He said, look, I'd like to help. I run a big community foundation. Diamond says, come for dinner. Otherwise, we don't want your help because your help won't help. And I'm part of Elements, which you're very familiar with, Sidel. We started that, and some of the foundations wanted more to administer the grant. They were giving us in money. I would just let go of that thought. We're not going to apply to philanthropists. We're going to find individuals who have the means to come and have dinner with us. come and find out who we are. Before you give us money, you have to prove you have the right to help us, to serve us. And that's, it sounds idealistic, but I know as a member of the ruling class, okay, that we're waiting for the invitation. I'm waiting for you to come and say, could you just find out who we are? Could you learn who we are and get out of this notion of grants and charity, philanthropy? It's all, I totally agree with you. And that's why Diamond is such a hero to me. It's because he understood that unless you find out who we really are, your money won't help, which is fine. And we don't need that much money. That's why as soon as you talk about scale, is this replicable? That's the empire talking. I don't care about scale or speed. How long will it take? I don't know. How long so,
So Dale,
to back away from the philanthropy and the charity. Now, this is what part of what Kevin has invented is ways of people with wealth to distribute that as and call it an investment. It's not charity. It's not, anyway.
I was just going to add to that, Sadell, and you know this because you and I've talked about it many times, is that we have to just keep teaching good theology. We have to just keep teaching the hand is connected to the arm. We have to, it breaks my heart sitting and listening over and over and over the last 2 days, all of the stories from what Peter's talking about to what Dr. Jennings was talking about and to the stories that have come out in the sessions about the things that have been broken in the name of God, that were broken in the name of capital or colony or selfishness.
Or progress.
Or development. The first time I heard you, Peter, say that, I don't remember whether the word was poverty or poor, but it was like there are no poor people. It freaked me out. It was like it was one of those moments in my life where somebody said something that was so alien to what I thought that I couldn't hear what you were saying. And it's taken me years to understand what you were talking about. That if we just put our colonial or development or those labels on things, it stops them.
Yes, it does. Because a lot of us grew up broke. I grew up broke. I had to borrow money from my aunt. My mother sent me to borrow money from Aunt Rosalind so we could have dinner that night. But I didn't think I was broken. I was just broke. I didn't have any money. And I think, that it's a tough notion. I have a hard time speaking about it. But to call somebody poor is to say you're broken. And then it activates $1 billion industry in Cincinnati to fix you. Fix you through the tools of colonialism. Oh, we're gonna start training black kids 1 year earlier, and we passed a levy for $4 million. Well, those $4 million didn't go into one black hand. It didn't go to one family. It went to a bunch of professionals and facilities to do some more training. So,
making 6 figures.
I know, and I say these things, but then I don't believe them either. It's like, this is too weird. Am I crazy? Part of the reason you hold a conference is to let people know they're not crazy. Because if you live a freedom-seeking life in a colonial world, you think you're nuts. And you're not crazy. And what you're saying, Sadell, so beautifully is you're not alone. This is the real message of Christ. This is the part of me that's a Christian. Is I discover that I'm not alone. And pardon?
I think one of the Christian things that we're still grappling with as African Americans is the statement of Jesus that the workman is worthy of his hire. And having the history of this country, it was not laziness that caused the Capitol building and the White House and these cathedrals and all of those things to be built. it was, on the backs of people of color who were owned as property and
Yeah.
creating wealth, and who never received even the 40 acres nor the mule that they were promised to in order to establish themselves. And there is a debt, honestly, that is owed.
There is reparations makes sense.
And philanthropy is not that debt.
Beautiful.
And the healing and the repentance that would have to come from, I had a story where one of the students that I had grew up and realized that his family had owned a slave, called me and said, Sidel, I just found out that my family owned a slave. And I want to call this person and I want to do something. I want to offer their children free education. I want to personally do something because my family was personally benefiting from the slave labor that this person did. Can I call this person? What do you think about me as an individual going to try to do something to right this wrong, which my family personally benefited from? And it was the call was flabbergasting to me because I had never had any individual person come with a heart of repentance to say, I know that where I am now was not attributable only to the hard work of my family. And I want to intervene and do something because I am a Christ follower and this was wrong.
I think reparations, what Rosalie and Kevin are creating or organizing or orchestrating, is a form of reparations. What the amount represents, it's not giving everybody $1,000. It's not setting up a college account for every Black kid in America. That's not reparations. That's just another form of philanthropy, but investment. And there is something to be repaired. And you're right, that was all about economics. Adam Smith celebrated, the cotton mills of Glasgow. And part of the reason was because they had free labor producing that cotton. And that's it's still going on. That's what bothers me. We all benefit. Of course, I benefited from that. And I think that's why these investment tools are, to me, a form of reparation.
I think one of the things that, as I see Sidel as a pastor, I was also influenced by not just my pastor, my church, but the people that I sit next to the pews with. And I think the church can be a great example of how economic structures could look. Meaning that in there's intangible currencies that roll through when you have a practice of friendship. The gospel is a great guide itself to do that. And when we leave the pew of our church, I think I can honestly say I do this not because of my church, because I do this because I'm affirmed in my faith. And what I'm affirmed about is that every contribution on this planet counts. It is all God's. And it is there. And so when we can create, get out of the manufacturing model, throw away all measurements, or not all measurements, all outcomes, change them to discoverables, figure out how we live our lives as neighbors. When institutions can start to shift that way of being, and when I go to church on Sunday, and Sidel, as a great pastor, affirms my faith by the story, by being the witness, that's the thing that's going to shape. Because you know who go to church? People on boards of foundations, mayors, right? You know who made bad policies that caused Black people to be homeless?
Yep.
People who went to church.
The church.
So think about it when we think about that, and think about the intangible currencies that we all have, right? And think about the other, the people we call the other, the people we need to help. Think about how we shift that, how we share power by asking the question, what are we willing to lose, right? then ask the question, who are we willing to learn from? And we need to look over at the others and say, we need your help.
See, I always feel if I'm looking for God, I'll find it in your eyes. I don't have to go to temple or the church to find God. And it's a strange experience for me to go into churches because they're so welcoming at the door, but then we all sit in pews nailed to the floor. And we don't look at each other. All I can see is the backs of not in your church, I believe. But this is what he means. Everything, every structure, every design, every room has to be an expression of this neighborliness. And Jubilee is the biblical language for what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Every 7 years, you forgive the debts of the poor. Let's just do that. Last year was the 400th anniversary, and we called it a Jubilee year. And every 49 years, you return the land to the rightful owners. Well, I'm thinking this is the 48th year. And I'm thinking this is the 6th year. And so the church has the language. It has the tradition. It's that's why I love the faith and finances as a couple.
But to move out of the realm of the word help, I think is where most people is wanting to go.
Yes.
Move out of the mindset of helping,
Yes.
and move into the biblical mindset of what is just.
What is just in the 10 Commandments.
And what is right.
Stop coveting. Right.
And if we can get to that framework, that's how we can move forward. What is just?
See, if you take it to the extreme, all advice is a form of colonialism.
Oh,
Really know what's best for you? Really? People say all the time, well, when I was in your situation, here's what I did. Well, that pretends that you turned out well.
Generally, you were not in my situation, particularly your
Yeah, you didn't turn out so great. So cut it out. History is evidence.
We're not there.
And I think that's what you guys are. That's the new narrative. We're not here to help you. We're here to understand you, to connect with you, to fall in love with you, to find out what your gifts are. I'm not interested in what you're not good at.
This has been cool. It's been like close to being in the living room with y'all.
What?
I said it's been close to being in the living room with y'all. It's as good as it's gonna get right now.
yeah.
It's great.
One of the fantasies I have is that with COVID and with the unrest or whatever you want to call it in this country right now, that we could find a way to make this a jubilee where we could break it all and start over, which I think is what Jubilee really does. It just says, no, those power systems that you have built up over the last 49 years, it's time to stop and start again from equal footing. How could we do that? How could we reimagine what it is we do as people who live on this land in a brand new way? So
that's what everybody on this conference, Diamond and Sadell at the moment, and you too, Rosalie and Kevin, you're reimagining. You can imagine a world. I asked Walter Brueggemann's Old Testament. I said, well, why did it take the Jews 400 years to leave Egypt? And he said they couldn't imagine being free.
oh,
And I think what you guys represent is that act of imagination. And once you imagine being free, then you find the methodology. You can't start with the methodology. We have all kinds of methodologies, but I think the reason we hold a conference is to allow me to imagine an alternative future that I didn't know existed. And I'm not crazy, and I'm not alone, and there's nothing wrong with me, even at a personal level. For faith community, start with the notion there's nothing wrong with you. You didn't come here to get fixed, and I didn't come here to fix you. In the extreme, I need a police officer to take it, but I don't need a police officer to keep me safe and keep us safe. I don't need a doctor to keep me healthy. I need you. And that's, to me, what the faith is about. And I like the word faith more than hope. Hope means I got to wait for something. I'm out of time. People tell me, well, give me some more time. I said, tell me about time. I'm late in the fourth quarter. And so, but hope is kind of, I don't know, people are selling hope a lot, but it means you got to wait. Wait for what? The kingdom of God to die. And I just feel faith is the right word. And faith doesn't need evidence. You don't need data. You don't need research. That's not how you operate, you guys. And I love the faith that you are. And that I forgive you for the preaching.
Well, I'm gonna put a pin in this with a quote from our friend Tim Sorens that is just so on target for what we're talking about here. From the time we started Faith and Finance, Tim has been calling us back with this sentence that what we need to be about at Faith and Finance is showcasing an alternative economic imagination that comes from our faith.
Beautiful.
So I want to dismiss us into the world as we would do in the Episcopal Church, into the world to continue to imagine that alternative economics that will come from our faith or that already exists in our faith that we can grab hold of. I want to thank you, Sadell and Diamond and Peter for being with us, and have to just name a couple of people: Corey Bruins, Melissa Thalman, and Rachel Johnson, and Charlize Latour, who have been behind the scenes, spinning all the balls and keeping the faith for us and trying to keep us online in this virtual world. And we couldn't have done it without them. And thank you all. And we're going to gather again soon and see where we go from here. Thank you.